Values cannot be taught to be practiced just at school. This should happen in a social setting in the society, including the family and the entire population. And therefore, we brought in the issue of empowering and engaging parents not only to be part and parcel of value-based education, but also in the process of what their children are learning in school. And that also had a sub-recommendation on community service learning, considering that we have seen in our society that children, young people, including adults, are quite individualistic. It's about them being serviced or served, but it's never about what they can do for their families and the society. So the value-based education is linked up with parental empowerment and community service learning. And our data confirmed that approximately 75 secondary school children attend day schools coming from their homes, from their guardian's home. Sorry? 75% approximately. And this is, there's like 65% of them are purely day school. There are some boarding schools that have day wings. So when we put it together, we realize like 75% of the children actually attend day schools coming from the parents or guardians' home. This is very important for the CBC and for the value-based education that you had raised earlier, that these children who will be transiting when they are much younger, at the age of 11 or 12, can continue, the majority of them can continue being with their parents while also attending day schools, thus providing more time to continue understanding how the children are learning and how they are practicing their values, not only in school, so that values are not just a school thing, but also at home and in the community. Parents are seeing children doing things and requesting to be assisted to do things. So we have a whole chapter there where we made recommendations on how that assessment needs to be done, all the way from early childhood through the system, all the way to the universities. So it's gonna be competency-based assessment. What has the child learned? How are they able to translate it into action? That is what the teachers will be doing. And you can now see the connection between the competency-based curriculum for learners in relation to the competency-based teacher education. There is discomfort in the competency-based curriculum compared with 844. Now, those are two different things. 844 is a structure of education, and I hear parents, we want to go back to 844. That was a structure. My child to go for 8 years, be examined, go for 4 years, be examined, go for another 4 years in a college, and so on. However, when we come to the CBC, we are talking about a curriculum, content, and how it's being offered. That means the process of teaching and how the learner is learning and how the teacher assesses achievements of what has been learned. The generation that has children in CBC went through the system of 844. The curriculum was teacher content centered. The teacher knows it all. The teacher says everything that the learner needs to know. All what the learner needed to do is to have a good memory, to capture what the teacher is saying, be able to read and memorize what the textbooks are saying, buy test papers, past test papers to see the rhythm of how they will be examined. The parents to engage tutors for overtime teaching, weekend teaching, and so on, to tutor their children so that they master how the examination will usually comes. And then wait for the 8 years, go, sit for 3 days, pass or fail in recalling what they learned. That was how the 844 operated. And after doing the 8 years, the KCP, a small fraction who are gifted in recollection of what teacher says or what the book says were labeled as success stories, and hundreds of thousands who are not gifted in that particular kind of intelligence were labeled as failures. And as you may know, we now appreciate that there are multiple intelligences that children will have. Some children have various of those intelligences. Others are gifted with only one intelligence, maybe an intelligence of knowing how to move their muscles and run very, very fast. And they can be trained when they hear the gunshot, they skip and run very fast in less than 9 seconds. Others may not have that intelligence. The previous system of education, which is being phased out, was focusing on one aspect of the various multiple intelligences that children have. The CBC is opening the whole education world to all children, regardless of the kind of intelligences that they are gifted. The difference is in how we teach what the learner is supposed to learn. The difference is on how the teacher is able to facilitate learning, encourage learning to learners to learn how to learn by themselves. So that is the difference, not to go to school expecting that they are going to learn from the teacher. They go to school expecting the teacher to help them to learn what they are able to learn and do best. Transition of grade 6 to 7 will be a transition of coming from primary into secondary. Now, the next question that comes in, okay, how will that happen even as you use assessment, yet we know that the existing secondary school has only 4 classes, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4. Because we are saying they are transitioning to secondary. They are not remaining in their classroom of grade 8. They are going physically into another space. So we did a national audit. While some schools were clearly showing they would be overstretched by having an extra class, the data was also showing that in this country, there exists secondary schools with extra infrastructure that is not being used. For example, a school that is having extra 10 classrooms. So we made recommendations based on the findings and based on the fact that the major TOR had the words effective implementation. We knew we had to make recommendations that demonstrate cost effectiveness and rationalization of resources. So we made a recommendation and said, yes, the data, and we have the names of each and every school. So if we say this one has more classrooms, we are talking of school X. If this one needs extra classrooms, we are saying this is school X. And so we made recommendations and said, it's very important to rationalize existing infrastructure and resources so that resources can be directed where they are needed most. We also made recommendation, rationalize the human resource that exists, look at their qualification and see how we can optimize the human resource that exists to meet the CBC. That does not mean that there will not be need to employ more teachers. There are schools that will require an extra classroom for year 2023. If you are single stream, there are schools that will require 1 extra classroom. If there are 4 streams, there are schools that will require those 4 classrooms for year 2023. But this requires rationalization considering the economic situations we are in, and so is the human resource. Different story, but they exist. One school, maybe with 2 streams, it hardly has 100 children. Another one, 50. Another one, 200, and so on. So our recommendation was this: using the GPS to completely confirm that these are walking distance of the same catchment. This is a situation where some of them could be merged to optimally use the primary school infrastructure that exists release one of the infrastructure for the school and create a secondary school without having to build classrooms, which would mean that the government would only invest in other infrastructure that is required in a secondary school, like the labs and so on. We also made a recommendation and said where institutions are in close proximity, they should be ready to share resources, infrastructural resources like sports infrastructure and so on. We went even a step further and saying if there is a technical institution, you don't have to ask government to build a workshop for a neighboring secondary school. And there are people in this country who have experienced that when it came to woodwork or metalwork or whatever in their high schools, they would use a neighboring institution. These are Kenyan institutions that have been built using public funds. So we encouraged the sharing of resources as much as possible. So this idea of a child coming to ask that evening, and I have had parents saying that they come home very tired. Let me give an example of my son and how I responded to that. So he calls and he tells me, now, Effort wants clay soil. The teacher has asked for clay soil. I know that boy, he will not leave his father alone. So he is calling because he is frustrated. Now what do I do? I've just come home and now you are the one in CBC. So I told him, look here, you are the dad. Effort has no other dad. No, ma'am, you know where we live is red soil. I said, I also know that down the valley there are marshy places and there is cotton soil. I have never even been there, but I know marshy soil, utapata cotton soil. I know from experience. So I told him, please, just walk with your son down there, get him clay soil. And one thing that he will never forget is not that he got clay soil, is that his dad walked with him down there and helped him to get clay soil. He may be among the few in that class who will have clay soil and it will be used to teach everybody else. He may never remember that, but he will remember when teacher asked for clay soil, my dad was with me. Teacher is able to see way ahead. And in this time and age, there are those hitches that are coming that the teacher is asking overnight, which may not be fair. And I am sure as these questions keep coming up, the Teachers Service Commission will rise to the occasion to actually emphasize on how this should happen. There should be something that indicates that at this point there will be need for clay. At this point you should be preparing, maybe we shall be making the scarecrow